First of all, we had Ronnie Lott. He's stuck in tackling some big data problems outside, so he should be here in a minute right now. Let me move on to the other person. We have Andre Bouvier. Andre is a private investor and technology consultant. And Andre has so many kind of items to his credit. It's kind of hard to go through all of them, but let me go through some of the most important ones. You know, Andre has been, those of you who heard of the miso soup analogy, the acronym, you know what miso soup stands for, Andre? It's like Microsoft, IBM, SAP, and Oracle. So Andre has been an executive of 3 of those 4 companies. And apart from that, he's also been the founder of, he was the founder of Tahoe, and somewhere in between, he was also the president of the SAS Institute. So we've got Andre on the line as well. Then lastly, we have Ravi Kalakota, managing director from Alvarez and Marcel, and the former CIO of Marsh & McLellan, and also the best-selling author about 10 business books, which you may have read. One of them is called Electronic Commerce, and there's a big, long list of things he's written. But most recently, he's on the faculty of the International Institute of Analytics. So, and Ronnie, again, will be joining us in a little while. Let me just give you a brief background of Ronnie for those who have not heard of him. I'm sure there will be just a few people who may not have heard of him. Ronnie is the co-founder of HRJ Capital, a managing member of Slot Auto Ventures, and something in his background is that he's also played safety for the San Francisco 49ers, guys. And incidentally, he was also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in the year 2000. So what we've got here, folks, is we have this league of extraordinary gentlemen. Each one of them has done multiple things in their lives, be it in business, in sports, or for different areas. And we got all of them together here specifically to talk about big data. And big data is kind of the basis of a lot of discussion right now. So if you guys recall this or you might have seen some of the material in the press lately, back in last month at the Davos event, there was a discussion around big data. And during that discussion, one of the things that came up was that big data was a new class of economic asset, just like gold or currency. And in fact, we could have titled this webinar, "Gold is the answer, what is the question?" And I'm sure we would have had a kind of a similar response to people coming in right now. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is everyone has seen, or a lot of us have seen, the McKinsey report, which I've got a couple of extracts here on right now. And there are a lot of applications for big data out there. And some of them, there are so many of them that we've got to figure out how to narrow it down and figure out what are going to be the most pertinent to the business that we're talking about right now. But first, let's do a quick sort of background on SAMA and data analytics from SAMA. So for all of those who don't know SAMA, we've been doing data for a very long time, even right for the last 15 years. A lot of it has been in the enterprise data warehouse space. And in fact, we were doing data before data was cool. We would, like, before a lot of people were talking about data, we were doing it for many years before that. And what SAMA represents in terms of the next generation of data and analytics is a unique combination of the ability to get structured data, syndicated data, and unstructured data to gain insights into what we're doing. So on the one hand, we have millions of hours of work done on the enterprise data warehouse. We have the ability to incorporate structured, unstructured, semi-structured data. And we're probably the only company of its size who can combine the old world with the new world. So with that kind of brief background, let's go straight to questions from the audience, questions for our panel here. So the first question is going to go to Andre, and the question is for you, Andre, is what are the most compelling business opportunities that can be addressed through big data, in your opinion?
Well, let's first define. I think, in fairness to the audience, we should describe what big data is, because it's got a lot of different. I think it's a term that's badly overused or abused and overused in the industry. So let me first start about what big data is. So the world that we live in now today, to me, when I look at big data, it's machine-generated data coming from either, things like road sensors, things like intelligent RFID tags, and all the way, and it includes obviously things like social media. So you're talking about a deluge of a lot of data. So hence, I think the fair description of calling it big data. But where it's very, very different than the world that I've previously lived in, which is where we tackle structured data. Structured data is indexed, it's very well organized, and it typically is generated from inside operational systems such as your ERP system. So it's very well structured. You well know that 80% or plus of that data is valuable, and so therefore you tend to guard it carefully, and when you mine it, there's a very good chance of finding a nugget of gold in there. Okay, very different than big data, where you're not particularly sure. There's a nugget in there, but you don't know where it's buried within a large pile of data. Okay, and so every industry will benefit from it, especially any industry that deals with the consumer. As we all know, 70% of the U.S. GDP is driven by the consumer.
Right.
And so if I'm a product manager at Procter & Gamble, I want to hear real time what's being said on social medias like Twitter, Facebook, what's being said about my product. And so I can react quickly in regards to what do I need to do to be proactive to drive either sales up or down, or even tackle a problem about somebody saying something bad about my product. Right, but I want to even go deeper. Is it? And then once I know I have an issue, is it a cultural issue? Is it a subset of the population that comes from a different ethnic background that has a problem with my product? Is it a different geography? Is it a pricing? Is it something actually that could be malice that can trace it back to a competitor who may have blogged about my product? So it's very, very different than what we traditionally dealt with in the structure world, and there's a lot more of that data. And so anybody today that stands up and says, we've got an end-to-end solution and we know how to tackle that, I think is wrong. Now, there are some firms, and clearly if I'm sitting here today representing Sama on this seminar, it's because I believe that they've already started and they're already building a solution. But neither Sama doesn't have the entire solution, and neither does anyone else in the industry have a solution. But at least they've recognized what the problem is, they've started, they put a framework together, and they've already put together some products.
Yeah, in fact, the gold analogy is pretty appropriate. I think we talk about data as being a currency of the future or gold of the future. We've got, so it's kind of appropriate to be in San Francisco country with the 49ers talking about gold. So talking about the 49ers and talking about tackling some traffic problems here, Ronnie Lott has just entered into the room. Ronnie, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
And Ronnie's going to tell us a little bit about his perspectives. Ronnie, the question that you're talking about here is, what do you think are the most compelling business opportunities that can be addressed with big data? I mean, now, you've been on business, you've been in sports for a long time, so you have a very different perspective than us business folks. So what do you think, Ronnie?
No, it's really interesting and just fascinating listening to everyone talk about it. I think what's amazing to me is that when you start talking about data and understanding it and how it works and how it can make you smarter, I think one of the challenges, though, is that here we're talking about helmets. And when we're talking about helmets, especially given the fact that now we're seeing more concussions in the game of sport, in all sports. And now, what do you do with that data, and how do you analyze that data? And I know for myself and John Madden, we've spent a lot of time here recently trying to get the NFL and encouraging them to understand how data plays a role in not only protecting the game, but also helping the game. And now you're talking about analyzing helmets. And when you think about helmets, helmets have evolved over years.
Right.
When you talk about how they've evolved over years, now we're going into this new age of understanding how to not only analyze what the data says after having a concussion, but more importantly, to be able to protect yourself in a way where now that person looks at himself and says, I got the right helmet, and this helmet is right for me because I know that my head could be susceptible to certain injuries. So I think data is not only going to be a big factor for fantasy sports, because we know the fantasy sports, which all of us play, is a very valuable concept in understanding big data, but I think also at the same time, it's going to be very, very practical to keeping people safe and keeping them healthy and keeping them on the field. And I think that when you just talk about that subject matter, the NFL will tell you, we have all this data, we don't know what to do with it.
There you go. You got to look for the gold.
And by the way, we're looking for solutions.
Right.
By the way, we're looking for ways to analyze it and to make so it can make sense to us as we make better equipment for our athletes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And tying it back to sports is kind of ironic because I was in England recently meeting with McLaren. And so we're talking about licensing some of their technology. And so now it's applying real-time analytics to the data. And so I was asking the guys, and I was asked by a large pharmaceutical company, which we'll leave nameless at this point, but asked me to go look at the technology because they want to bring it in for supply chain optimization. So I was trying to recap and say, okay, what's this got to do with I'm a car nut? I said, but I don't drive there, I drive Italian. I just say, okay, why are they sending me to go look at a British car company and what's in that thing? It was unbelievable what they did with that technology. So what they do is McLaren monitors temperature of the tires, pressure, fuel consumption, and so on. Then they can't do that on the competitor's car. They do it for their car, but then they track the competitor's car. They pretty much know the data is somewhat similar in there. They track it, and then they tell the driver, stop being a hot dog. You're 3 laps ahead. Don't burn more fuel. Don't wear out the tires. Just stay calm. You're ahead of the guy. As he starts getting up to you, we'll tell you when to accelerate. But right now, by staying at this pace, you don't have to come in for a tire change and more fuel, and you'll outrun the guy. And it's fascinating because you think the driver is really driving, and he is, but he's really the extension. It's really the pit crew that's sitting there with all the data. It's really what I call the data jockeys that are really running the show.
Right.
Are saying, move forward, move this way, move this, and the race is actually won that way. You still need a good driver, don't get me wrong, but a lot is the data. And so now we're tying in the concept of real-time analytics to big data. Right? And we're talking big data from a car. So I can imagine when we're talking about big data coming from a social network, right, whether you're doing a political campaign or whether you're doing a product campaign, the amount of data. And I think the key is to finding the right consulting firm that can help you come in and analyze your specific requirements. And today, I have to say, they're going to have to stitch some pieces together for you because there's not an off-the-shelf solution. And it makes me kind of think you go back 20-some-odd years where large corporations had a supply chain optimization issue. They would bring in consultants. They would do a BPR, business process reengineering study, and as a result, they would codify that into an ERP system. That's well proven to have paid for itself, and today nobody questions the wisdom of an ERP system.
Right.
But now we're going to have to go to the same thing now as we tackle on what I call the information supply chain within your organization. And now the extra thing is you've got to deal with external sources of data that affects your company, okay, in real time.
Well, yeah, right. You said it best. I mean, the driver now is equipped to be able to make better decisions. Imagine you're the CEO and you're driving that company. And by the way, not only are you understanding all the data that's coming through you and by you, but at the same time, having people around you that are helping you analyze the data is going to allow you to be a better CEO. And it was great. I was sitting here. I would love to drive a McLaren. I'd rather be driving a great company. I'd rather be able to drive a great company knowing that I got the right resources around.
Right.
Well, and ironically, around this table, I mean, you and I are probably the guys who put the heat on to the CEO and the CIO. I'd like to hear that actually from Ravi, who's been a CIO, and say, Ravi, how would you tackle the problem today?
Well, Andre, I think the opportunities that we are seeing, at least from a consulting side, are quite varied, depending on the maturity of the industry and the pressure that the industry is under. The consumer industry is where we are seeing the most action right now. So if you look at travel, heavy users of big data. Because the industry just is drowning in data, whether it be hotels, whether it be airline rest systems. The pricing changes by the second in these industries. So they are correlating where people are traveling to, how much are people willing to pay. So they're monitoring an astounding number of data points to figure out how to come up with different variations and combinations. So that's one area where we're seeing tremendous opportunity, where new techniques are being built. The other area where we are seeing a lot of action right now is in the e-commerce side with the web portals, really. Everybody's familiar with what LinkedIn is doing or Facebook is doing. Obviously, Amazon is sort of the benchmark that's out there. But what most people don't understand is companies like Target, companies like Macy's, these guys are extraordinarily very, very complex users of big data. I mean, they're tracking 60, 70 million customers, and they're tracking them across multiple channels, channels that the clients are interacting with. I can tell you there is one retailer that we are doing a pilot for who's able to monitor you when you walk into the retail establishment. They know exactly which aisle you're in and what product line you might be looking at that point, so that they can send you an SMS message with a coupon. So the ability, really, as you were talking, what has changed? What has changed is we are able to capture data from sensors in a way we've never done before. The way we are able to analyze the data in real time that we have never been able to do before, and then we are able to do these mashups where we're able to actually drive decision making in a way we've never done before. And it's the combination of all these things coming together that I think is creating a slew of new opportunities that's just frankly extremely exciting. And like they say, we're only in the first inning of a multi-inning game. So that's really what we're seeing in the marketplace.
No, I think that's great. I think we've come a long way from trying to correlate people who buy diapers and beer at the same time, which was seemed like 100 years ago, right? This is like machine data, large volumes of it. Now, I think one of the questions we would ask for all of us is, how do you make money off of this? Or how is that, are those ways of making money obvious? Would anyone care to respond to that about?
Well, it depends on the side of the table you're sitting at.
Right.
So if we're addressing the audience here, and obviously I don't know who's on the other side, right, as an audience, but I can guess that anybody sitting in the audience, right, their business has to be impacted, as I said before, to dealing with the consumer, whether it's direct or indirect. When you have the consumer dealing, driving 70% of the GDP,
right,
you're either making a product that you're selling directly to the consumer or it's being sold indirectly to the consumer. Okay? So, but ultimately, it all goes down to the consumer. So if you look at that and you say, what is it I need to do? And my recommendation is to start with a small project, bring in your trusted advisor or your favorite consulting company to come in, analyze what you're trying to accomplish, right, and then start with a small project. But you have to start to be able to tackle the big data issues today, okay?
Right.
Because if you don't, your competitors are going to. You need to understand what the sentiment is. In fact, the U.S. government, okay, the Treasury, which isn't exactly known to be the most dynamic of the department, but the Treasury last year put out an RFP where they want to capture all the data in regards to, so they can analyze consumer sentiment, so that they can set policies on, do we raise interest rates, lower interest rates? What do we need to do to stimulate the economy? So, I mean, so you can imagine how much data we're talking about. It's enough data to keep EMC and NetApp happy for the rest of their life, right? Just storing the stuff, never mind making sense of it. So there's so much demand for trying to make it. And again, the key, though, and maybe it's we talked about that, and I'm not sure that's the best analogy, but in the structured world that I lived in, where I come from, you had so much intelligence about where the data was. I compare it to mining for gold underground, where you know exactly where the vein is, the size of the vein. You set the crew down, you mine your hole, you set the crew, and you got a good chance that when you mine that vein, you're going to have a high level of nuggets coming out of this thing. Big data, unfortunately, because of the lack of tools, it's like, here it is. It's out there in the cornfields, guys, and you say, okay, so you mean I got to do open pit mining, sift through all this material to try to find that golden nugget. And unfortunately, that's probably a good analogy. So you say, well, okay, but I don't think it's good for the ecology to go out there and just strip all the mine, mine all the farms. So how can we find that data? What's relevant and what? So big data, I think the first key is there's no doubt you got to be able to store it all, and I know we can do that. The second part is how do we sift through it very, very quickly and figure out what do we throw away?
What do we keep?
Right, and what do we keep? And why are we keeping it? And then being able to extract the value. And obviously I'm somewhat biased because I look at some of the products that Sama's already put together and some of the methodology that you put together to do that. You're already, a company like Sama is already out there, right, to their respective customers and trying to get them down that path. So, and for the sake of the customer sitting on the phone today at the end of this WebEx, hopefully or webinar, I hope that they've got their own trusted advisor, and if not, I would encourage them to call Sama.
Right, right. Now, Ronnie, you understand competitive advantage more than anybody, better than anybody else, or as good as anybody else, whether it's in sports, whether it's in business. What do you think about early adopters gaining some kind of a competitive advantage when it comes to with big data?
Well, when you think about it, that's what the 49ers did. I mean, when you talk about the 49ers this year, their competitive advantage was Jim Harbaugh being able to come in right away and recognize their strengths. And he recognized those strengths by being able to analyze his team. Well, the same applies to what we're trying to do today, and that is getting people to understand that early on, if you want to be an early adopter, you have to be able to have a competitive advantage and understanding what are you great at. I mean, not good, but what are you great at?
Know your strengths.
And knowing your strengths. And I think one of the challenges for all of us sometimes is really understanding what our strengths are. The only way that you can analyze that sometimes is being able to look at your team and say, okay, what is it that we're really great at? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the Giants will tell you what they're great at was having a chance to win in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
I mean, yes, they had a great quarterback, but they had a chance to win the fourth quarter. Well, a lot of people, when they look at that team, they look at the team and they forget about the talent. And they forget about what the defense does in the fourth quarter. And really, it's not just the quarterback. It's the defense being able to apply pressure and get the ball to Eli more times.
Right.
So, again, there's some strengths there that a lot of us don't want to really recognize, but they're strengths. And I think that when you talk about this business and being an early adopter, the main thing is understanding what you're all about and who you are. And I think that if you can get there quickly and be able to identify that and then dig into it and be committed to it. The hard part is being committed. And to me, I think that's the challenge for all of us is that it's just like being married. It's being committed.
It's a process. You got to commit to the process.
You got to dive deep into it. And the reason you got to dive deep into it is because you know that there are all these fundamentals that you got to work on each and every day. That's what a great team does.
Yep.
That's what a great business does. And anytime you see a great early adopter, that's when that person understands that he's got to be committed to the cause.
Great, great. And I've got about 117 people on the call here, and each of them asking a bunch of questions. But let's just go through some of the questions on my side. And one question for you, Andre, is have you seen any interesting companies lately who are doing good work on this stuff? And I'd like to ask the panelists for that opinion too.
Funny enough, I mean, you can go through the whole spectrum of the food chain, but there's actually a small company here in the Valley, and I won't name it. It's partly funded, but it's kind of interesting. It makes an intelligent RFID tag, and it's strictly for the food industry. And I said, my gosh, how big can that be? So they walked me through how much spoilage is written off every year. The food gets to the store.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge
and the store thinks that it's good for 7 days, and it actually is only good for 2 days. And I said, well, okay, walk me through the scenario. And they said, well, a lot of the food that is being shipped by trucks, he said if it's on one side of the truck, depending on what time of day the truck is driving and where the angle of the sun is, that side of the truck can actually get warmer than the other side of the truck. So though you think that the whole batch is safe, it may not be. So now they put intelligent RFID tags on every pallet. And as the truck is driving, they can monitor the temperature of the food and whether it's within specs. And it actually can then, the wholesaler can actually make a decision, says you're never going to make the Sacramento, okay, with that food being respecting the 7 days. So you're going to unload half of the load, which is on the left side of the truck. When you're in San Francisco, I've already set it up at a discount. I'm selling it to another wholesaler for this price. And the other one is, and then a byproduct, and it's okay, well, that sounds interesting. And they say, oh, yeah, but a byproduct is very large insurance company that actually insures the produce.
Right.
Now says, with this, we know who to back charge when there's back product delivered. And yet says, okay, we're not paying that claim because it was the trucking company who said that they committed to delivering the product and keeping it at such temperature and humidity, didn't deliver. And by the way, that goes over to vaccines, which I didn't realize that vaccines are very subtle, and vaccines you can't tell. If you ship a vaccine and for a very little amount of time that it's taken out of the wrong temperature and you administer it to a person, you can kill that person. And so therefore that becomes very important to track the vaccine to make sure that it never leaves the scope of the temperature that it was supposed to be shipped in.
Wow.
So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and it just starts with a small RFID tag. But you got to build the whole food chain. So how do you can imagine how many tags per pallet, per truck every day. So you got to be able to assimilate that, right? And then figure out, okay, what's it telling me? What's the data telling me? By carrier, by food type, and then transferring all that information to the shipper, the insurance company, the guy who's wholesaling it, the guy who's receiving it. So that's just one example. I mean, you go on and on and on about, and so that builds infrastructure guys. So you need guys like Cloudera. You need people like NetApp to be able to store the data. You need people like Pentaho to be able to extract the information and generate a report out of it, right? The platform that you guys have put together here at Sama, right, with 6 Sense, right, to bring that even a further step forward, right? So there's a whole bunch of interesting companies in the Valley, and the interesting part about it is nobody owns the whole solution, and so co-opetition is the key word right now in the Valley. Until somebody wants to decide they want to be the 500-pound gorilla. But right now it's co-opetition out of necessity.
Everybody's got to work with everybody else.
Exactly.
Very interesting. You're talking about examples which are life and death, like vaccines. And Ronnie is talking about helmets, which you can kill people if you don't have them designed properly and all that kind of stuff. So it's no longer like a nice to have. Big data is going to be or big data-based analytics is going to make the difference between success or failure or life and death. In the case of the healthcare example.
Oh, yeah, and if properly applied, I mean, I don't mind somebody knowing technically where I am with my GPS positioning on my phone and send me an ad that's relevant to me. Like, okay, like last night I was in San Francisco. Well, they know that I don't live in San Francisco. So if I'm in San Francisco and it's dinner time, I probably want to eat. Okay, well, there's Andre like Chinese food. Well, why not say, hey, Andre, notice you're in San Francisco again. Welcome back. By the way, here's a coupon for 10% if you want to eat at XYZ Chinese food, which, by the way, happens to be 300 yards from you. And if you want to, just press accept. We'll make a reservation for you. And then you walk into the restaurant and say, here I am.
Right.
And, I mean, you can go on and on about examples, but you can imagine, just fathom the amount of information that's got to be processed. But if it's processed properly, and then you approach me with something that's interesting to me instead of, I hate to say that, but somebody's sending me an ad for golf or something. My gosh, I wouldn't even know what a golf club. I probably know what a golf club looks like, but I don't know what it means, right? So you want things that are relevant to you.
And so, Ronnie, what you associate with a lot of big data or technology companies lately, and what do you think? What have you seen?
It's interesting because on one sense we're talking about Facebook and we're talking about some of the big organizations that are out there that have a ton of data, and on the other side, I was thinking of a company that's polar opposite, and it's relevant to what Andre was saying, and it's relevant from the standpoint that when you think of PATH is an organization that was started with the idea of not having everybody in your community be in your community. It's having a select few.
Right.
So now PATH is an organization that allows me, my mom, my dad, my wife connect, but to keep our community small. And so all the data that's being shared amongst us is a little bit different. I mean, in my case, if I'm on Facebook, I can't share everything.
Not get a lot of people.
I don't want to share everything. But with PATH, I have the ability to kind of keep it, closed. I can share it amongst my friends. I can not only share it amongst my friends, but the experience is the same. You still want to be able to have that ability to be able to have somebody share with you the opportunity to go have a nice dinner amongst your family. And the only way that they can do that is being able to understand what's going on within that small community.
Right.
So, yes, we have big communities, and yet a company like this, PATH, will be able to analyze everything that I want for my mom and dad, everything that I want for my wife, and better yet, it's going to probably be richer for me. It's going to be something that
improves your experience.
That's not only going to improve my experience, but it's going to be more relevant. And relevant means that I want my wife to be happy, right?
Right.
And so for us, I think where you're going to start to see is that it's going to be a different type of touch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you talk about touching another human being,
mm-hmm.
we do touch a lot of people now, but what if we're able to touch a person with different emotions
mm-hmm.
and different feelings? And I think that Path understands that, and I think that what you'll start to see is that we'll be able to emotionally do analytics on the things that hurt us, and the things that help us, the things that drive us, the things that we love. And I think that's another area of intelligence that we'll see, and Path is starting to kind of create that dialogue in that community that's allowing us to really feel close to one another.
Yeah, in fact, that's an example. Emotional analytics. That's a great sort of example of something which is very different from what we've seen before. I mean, just like you talk about, again, what was the question? There are so many different questions which could be addressed.
Well, I can tell you right now, Sunday, watching the 49ers play,
mm-hmm.
and the emotional intelligence that went on in that game.
Yeah, we could have an emotional
feature there. It was all over the place, right? In the fourth quarter, it was all over the place. And yet,
right.
I think that, imagine if the 49ers had a chance at that moment, right at the end, to say, guys, we need all the fans to do this at that moment.
Right.
I know for a fact that there's always a moment in the game where you really need something else other than just making a play. And now, as an organization in sport, you will be able to move people in a different direction just because of emotional analytics will allow you to say, this is what we need at this time. So there are going to be things that I see in sports that's going to change the evolution of the game. And the reason it's going to change is because now we can analyze that data real time.
Great.
And it's kind of ironic because to tie that in, as you well know, I started my career as a hardware engineer, but so computers can only store zeros and ones, and so they can only mimic how the left side of the brain thinks. And I'm going to Korea next month, actually look at a company that the way it stores information is not a zero and it's not a one, and it's got a different charge in this, it's called memristor. So it's a different charge that it can keep in a combination with resistor and memristor, and you can mimic the gray area of a brain, and therefore you can start mimicking sentiments.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll eventually be able to actually, and so you'll be able to measure emotional characteristic and store it. More important, store the emotional characteristic.
Wow, and play that back again and get relations, I guess.
It's fascinating. Toyota has their secret products of cars and what the future is going to look like in their products. It was amazing when you see what a car is going to look like, 10 years from now. And what's fascinating to me is that here we're talking about some of the things that you just pointed out. And what I'm amazed at is that all of a sudden you start to have this intelligence. And this intelligence that I saw a Toyota car, I dropped the car off. And when I dropped my car off, it went and parked itself. Can you imagine?
All right.
I mean, this was unbelievable. And then when you come out of the store, the car comes and pulls up
at the right place.
In the car. I mean, but again, what it does and what it's allowing us to do is it's allowing our brain to think different, and it's allowing the computer to be able to play in a more intelligent role. With all of that being said, we're going to have incredible experiences as we move forward. But that was just an example that I saw 2 days ago at a Toyota event that just blew me away. And I know now you start thinking of the data of, okay, now my car is parked where? Why is it parked here? Why did they? I mean, so all of a sudden, before you know it, now that store that knows that I just dropped my car off, will it fill up my gas tank for me? What will it do for me? So I mean,
it'll start analyzing and say, okay, how long did Ronnie have to wait for the car? So therefore, Ronnie lose patience. Therefore, will Ronnie come back and shop it?
Right.
That's all that gets covered. Now, we've got a whole bunch of questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to paraphrase one of them, and they say, and I'm going to put this one to Ravi. The question is, executives in my company have been making decisions based on gut instinct for the last 20 years. And what can we tell them about big data? And I guess the question for you, Ravi, is what are you advising your clients about using big data to make?
Basically, what we are moving towards is moving away from gut instinct to fact-based, I would say, decision-making. We are seeing decision-making not even at the executive level, but at the consumer level. The way consumers make decisions, I think, is fundamentally changing. Kind of what Andre raised and what Ronnie alluded to. Ronnie's example of the fan energy or capturing the fan energy at a creep moment in sport is exactly what you see in a retail setting. You want to be able to influence that consumer at the point of contact by using the social data, the mobile data, the local data. You want to be able to capture these multiple things and feed them into that point of contact. And that's really what it boils down to. So whether it be you're influencing people at the point of selling, marketing, whether you're tracking product, it's all about fact-based business processes or fact-driven business processes. Ultimately, when you look back at any business, what are we looking at? We're looking at business processes and how to improve business processes to enable an objective. And the objective could be marketing, HR, supply chain, IT, finance, depending on which type of business process you're looking at. So there are a variety of things to think about. So our clients, what they're struggling with is how they understand the power of this thing. But what they're struggling with is really how to get started. How not to get overwhelmed, how to think of a small proof of concept so that they can get going to attack these things. So marketing is where we are seeing the most action right now, marketing and sales. And mobility is really what's causing a lot of this thing. Because if you think about the iPhone is both a generator of data as well as a consumer of data. It's really amazing that the consumer is both the producer of the data as well as the consumer of the data. So we are seeing a whole paradigm shift taking place in the marketplace. And our clients are trying to figure out how to take advantage of this shift in the market.
So how do you talk to people who've been making decisions for the last many years on just gut instinct? How do you convince them that, hey, you got to think about data now instead of your visceral instinct?
Well, I think the customers are already shifting. If you look at the transition from ERP to business intelligence, from business intelligence to predictive analytics, and now we're looking at predictive analytics square or predictive analytics version 2, where you're able to take tremendous amount of information and automate the analytics. It's what we call a closed loop or a feedback loop that is fully closed, where you're able to not just get the insight, but you're able to act on the insight. So you're able to close the loop finally. The trajectory in the market is definitely moving away from gut instinct. So I think that the customers are ready. The customers are more than ready.
I was just going to add that, I mean, if you just take the Moneyball concept and you take what people have done in the game of baseball and you look at the gut instinct of picking someone. I mean, imagine that around the table, which we do every day in our HR departments, and looking at analyzing, and we would want to make better decisions about the people that we're hiring. Right. And you would then say, okay, well, how do we play Moneyball? And to understand that how we can make better judgment on the people, and we don't want to use our gut. And I think that you're going to start to see more and more people move in that direction, because what we do want to understand is we want to be able to feel comfortable. And when I watch Billy Beane, I would imagine that there are always those moments where he goes, is there something wrong? Did I do the right thing? Yeah. Did I do the right thing? Yeah. And yet you got to go back to what you believe in. And the belief is that I got to have more facts in front of me. And I think that he would say that not only do I need to have more facts, but it starts with data. It starts with understanding the data and how the data makes me be able to be smarter with my decisions. And I think that alone is really driving a lot of our decisions, and will continue. I mean, if all great quarterbacks don't do it by gut.
Yeah, they have a lot of data.
Not only do they have a lot of data, but imagine the hours and hours of information of understanding what it's like to be an expert. And so you eventually get there being an expert, but it's because of all the hours of exercise that you put into making that decision. And it becomes somewhat of a fact-based opportunity. And I think that we, as CEOs, which sometimes as a CEO, you've only been in the seat for a very short time, and yet you got to act like you've been in the seat for a long time. Well, if you want to act like you've been in the seat for a long time, you better have enough facts around you to be able to understand how to make a better decision. So I think you're going to start seeing more and more people leaning in that direction and almost pushing the world in that direction about a lot of issues, about just our relationships and about the people we hang out with.
Yeah, in fact, just to maintain competitive advantage, you don't have a choice. But to start taking data into account when making a decision.
Well, and then taking that data, though, and using it within a predictive analytics model. So as a good example, right, I've worked in about the entire spectrum of this thing, right? So being executive at Cognos, where we did reporting and analysis, but keyword analysis, not analytics, okay? And then companies like Sagent, where we did ETL, right? Or Oracle or IBM, where we did data warehousing. But the most thrilling job I've ever had was when I was president of SAS, because why SAS focuses on one thing, predictive analytics, where you take the emotion out. So what does a product like Cognos offers you? The ability to put together a nice dashboard, right? But then as a human being, I'm being asked to say, well, based on where the dots have been for the last 3 years, you as a human being with all your biases, you put that next dot. But now I'm doing this on gut feel. There's no mathematical model behind it, okay? And that's why predictive analytics is much more important, because it's based on mathematics, right? And it's based on the fact that it's a model that's been proven, and it takes all the human emotion out of it. And those decisions are usually made a lot better. And I mean, if you go look, I mean, SAS Institute last year did $2.7 billion, which is more collectively than Cognos Business Objects or IBM ever put together.
Right.
Why? Because customers recognize that the value of seeing what's coming up ahead through the windshield is a lot more important than looking through your rearview mirror. Okay? And ironically, using a car analogy, what does the car industry do? It started with ABS brakes, and then it said, okay, I'm going to tie that into the engine management system. I'm going to tie it into the stability control, and then it all puts that data. So it's constantly monitoring your wheel rotation, spinach, all that, and it puts it into a real-time analytics engine, and it says, based on the angles of the wheels, the slippage between the wheels, and where the car is going, okay, it's time to take control away from Ronnie. He's going to put that Porsche on that street. It's called Porsche Management System, right? PSM. And it takes the control away from Ronnie and says, okay, Ronnie, the little light left. It takes control of the car so Ronnie doesn't put the Porsche up the tree. And I'll tell you, I mean, I can tell you, I've tried again and again. I thought I was a pretty good driver, but I can tell you my track time is better every time I have the electronic nannies turned on as opposed to off.
And it gives you advice as you go along.
It doesn't give you any advice. It takes control.
It takes control right away.
As a human being, you can't react that fast. So
Yeah.
it's a real-time analytics engine that takes in all the various inputs and makes a decision on your behalf. Okay? Because for you folks who are old enough on this webinar, when you were a kid learning in school, what were you learning when you in driving school? Pump the brakes. If you hit today,
you don't do that.
Do not do that. Just hit the brake. The ABS control will take all the control away from you and will stop the car in due time, right? And if you don't, there's airbags.
Yeah, there are consequences for that. Yeah, so I have another question for Ravi from the point of view of enterprises. One of the questions that's coming from the audience again is, have large enterprises graduated from the talking phase on big data to the doing phase of big data? Have they graduated, or are they still in the early stages? What do you think people are really doing right now? Do you have examples of what people are doing to make this successful?
I think that's a good question. There are leading companies that have embraced this, and they're moving really fast. Whether they are in logistics, like Federal Express, you could call FedEx a UPS, a big data company, because they track millions and millions of points. Utilities, the government actually, believe it or not, is a big data place right now, whether it be in the intelligence community, whether it be in law enforcement. There are fantastic things happening in government that are all around big data. The smart meters in the utilities industry is big data. Retail we talked about, travel we talked about. So there are certain bleeding edge things that are just not just online, they're in real world, are happening right now. Now what to Andre's point, some companies will not make this shift and they will disappear because you are looking at a restructuring of the firm to be able to handle this volume of data, the business processes that need to be in place to make all this happen, whether it be data management, whether it be collection, whether it be integration of data, data management, the insight generation, and the action. The whole chain has to change. And some companies will not be making this journey, and they will go under. So the point is, we have lots and lots of examples that we can share where the journey, people are already taking this journey. The challenge is, how do you can't solve this in one shot. I mean, FedEx was not created one day. Amazon, for that matter, was not, it took 15 years to get there. So how do you do it in a systematic way? And that's where most companies, the senior leadership needs to wake up. It's not just going to be the guy handling data at the lower end, but more leadership needs to step up and say, so the point is, there needs to be a vision and a direction that pulls all this stuff together. There needs to be a focal point of how you make it happen. And so we go into some companies, we see that vision. I would say 60-70% of the time, most companies don't have the vision, and that's what separates the winners from the losers, really.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, think of Lehman Brothers.
Mm-hmm. These guys run Lehman Brothers.
Think about that.
Uh-huh.
Think about if they had done a stress test.
Mm-hmm.
Where would they be? And think of and so for me, when you think of the world, and if you apply what we're talking about today, there are companies that would be healthier.
Mm-hmm.
There are companies that would have survived, and so a lot of it is it's foreign when you have to put yourself in a position where you feel like you're not in control of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And that's a dangerous situation to be in. Yeah.
And so I think one of the challenges is going to be, how do you allow yourself to be curious enough to better yourself? I mean, as an athlete, Bill Walsh would always say, well, I want excellence. And then he would take us out on the field, and we would have to practice it. Mm-hmm. But the only way you can practice who they are and what they are, but I would imagine that once you understand that this is going to help you make better decisions, why would you?
About manufacturing. So we go back in the manufacturing sector where people decided that says, we can't continue to do it this way. Most operation and with the outside world, and tell me how I should retool, right? And how should I retool this thing? Because I know that I'm too biased. I'm too close to the job. I'm in it every day, and I'm too, you're set in your ways, right? And get that consulting firm to jolt you, and then introduce you to some new tools and some new methods, and then retool it. Because if you don't, the old way is just not going to work.
Well, that's great. In fact, that's sort of a good segue into another question which is coming from the audience, which is the McKinsey report talks about huge requirement for data professionals in the future. And so the question is, can the army we have in enterprises be retrained to meet these requirements, or do we need another army?
I don't think you need another army. You can't you can't train them fast enough. Okay, so but I do think that let's put it this way: if I was to advise my kids, that's where I tell them to go and specialize in. I think this is going to be something. When I was around, when I was at SAS, I mean, there's 1 million professionals around the world, independent consultants that make their living around SAS alone. Never mind, right? And continue to do very well. So yes, you're going to need some data scientists, but we're kidding ourselves. We think we're going to be able to crank them out of the universities fast enough. And so I think that you've got to look at frameworks. And again, I've got to be careful here so I don't self-promoting. But if you look at the framework that Sama's put together with 6 cents, right? So that a few data scientists could use it, as opposed to needing a whole army to replicate what that framework does. So you're going to have to look at frameworks and tools that can automate them to be able to do that. If you don't, the universities aren't going to crank them out fast enough, and B, you're going to get into a business contest in regards to paying them, and that's not where you want to be.
Great. I think we have several more questions coming in from the audience, but we are kind of running out of time. Are there any concluding remarks which you folks would like to make? Ronnie, in terms of what should people take away from this conversation in terms of like what do we do Monday morning?
Well, I would imagine that what I would take away from it is a call to action.
Right.
And the call to action is don't stand on the sideline. And if you're going to better yourself, how do you better yourself? How do you have self-awareness? How do you have self-examination? And I think one of the challenges in life is when it's uncomfortable, you know, the unexpected in life. And I think what's happening right now is that where we're headed with Sama and what we're trying to do is get people to understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable. We're here to help you. We're here to solve the issues for you. And here's some of the issues that we can provide for you. And here's some of the things that we can help you solve as we're moving forward. Being in that area of your life where now it's the unexpected, it's hard for a lot of people, but at the same time, it's exciting. And to me, I would imagine that people that are on the webinar, I mean, you got to be feeling really great about what you've heard. I mean, here's some great examples of what you can do right away to start getting people to move and calling people to action. And to me, that's why I'm excited when I'm walking out here, because I know how to drive my car now. Right?
And you know how to be fit for that too.
And better yet, I'm going to be a better CEO. You know, I'm going to be a better CEO because I'm going to have better opportunities to make better decisions for myself. So.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. Ravi, any closing comments you'd like to make before we close up?
Yeah, I think you know, this is an unstoppable trend. This is for real. So the question is, you know, what baby steps do you take to get there? And the other point I would make is people who don't embrace this will die. Companies, that is. And I'm pretty sure that this is a game-changing trend that way. Data, the other point I want to make is data is going to double every single year, whether we like it or not. And the challenges of managing data are pretty complex. So issues of data quality, data integrity, so big data is really like the top of the iceberg, you know, but there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath the iceberg with the blocking and tackling that needs to be handled. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of those fundamentals, because that's going to be what's going to separate the winners from the losers. So that's the point I want to make.
No, fantastic.
Andre? My remarks are simple. I mean, if I was on the other side of this webinar, I'd be looking at saying, what small project within the firm can I start with? Who's my external trusted advisor I can bring in to help me do that? Because most likely you don't have it internally. Don't be afraid to fail, because I'm telling you, if you don't start now and you wait for the world to you know, you're saying, hey, I'm going to let everybody else go with their project, I'll learn from their failure. Too late, the world's passed you by then, and they'll have passed you. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. So take the risk. Take and I'm not saying a wholehearted plunge for the whole firm. Take a few projects, but get to master it now. Understand how you're going to do it. That's just my advice.
Well, thank you. I think we've had an excellent discussion here with, as I said, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Thank you, Ronnie Lott, Andre Bobbier, and Ravi Kalakota. If you have any more questions, I know there are a lot of people who have questions from the audience who are not able to get them answered right now. Send all your, you can send email to bigdata_questions@sama.com, and we'd be happy to answer these questions as we go. very soon from the panelists and from the experts at SAMA as well. Thank you all for tuning in.